I gave my stepmother the Mother's Day gift, then watched her face as she finally understood what it meant. When my dad married Lauren, I was 13. Mom had passed away just over a year earlier. A sudden stroke took her before anyone could prepare. One morning, she complained about dizziness, and 95 days later, I stood by her grave wearing the dress I'd never worn. Dad waited exactly 14 months before introducing Lauren to us. She worked in marketing at his company. Perfect smile, sleek brown hair that always looked flawless. The kind of woman who wore designer heels to family picnics. She makes me happy again, Dad said quietly, but firmly. I need you to try, Mia. So, I tried. I helped Lauren unpack, carrying boxes filled with shoes to the closet where Mom's hiking boots used to live. I nodded when she swapped out our photos for modern paintings that didn't feel like home. I forced a smile when she turned Mom's flower beds into a minimalist patio, because apparently, gardening was outdated. For nearly 4 years, I played the part of the polite stepdaughter. I went to Lauren's work galas wearing dresses she picked out. I endured her friends, who praised how mature I was for 16. I bottled up my sadness behind straight A's and quiet compliance. Dad never noticed when my laughter disappeared, too caught up in Lauren's social circles and new business deals, caught up in their weekend retreats and wine tastings. Meanwhile, I clung to Mom's scarf every night until the scent faded. Lauren tried in her way. She bought me extravagant birthday presents, always things she liked. She threw lavish dinner parties and introduced me as our daughter to people who never learned my name. She even started a college fund for me, making sure everyone knew about her generosity. But when I got my first period, it was Google that taught me what to do. When I had nightmares about Mom dying, it was the family dog who comforted me. The breaking point came during my sophomore year. I had been cast as the lead in the school play, the first thing I'd felt passionate about since Mom passed. Opening night was the same evening as Lauren's charity gala. Obviously, you'll have to skip the performance, she said without looking up from her phone. The Morgans are bringing their son. He's at Stanford. Connections, Mia. Dad started to protest, but stopped when Lauren placed her hand on his arm. It's just a high school play, he said finally. There will be others. I went to my room and pulled out the antique jewelry box Mom had left me. Inside were her wedding ring, a lock of my baby hair, and a journal I'd never opened, too scared to face her final thoughts. That night, through tears, I read it from cover to cover. Most of it was what you'd expect. Her hopes for my future, cherished memories, advice she couldn't give in person. But the last entry, dated 2 weeks before she died, was different. If you're reading this, Mia, I need you to know about the safe deposit box. The key is taped inside this cover. What you find there will change everything. I'm so sorry. The key was small and silver, with the bank's name engraved along the edge. The next day, I skipped school and went to First Trust Bank. The manager recognized me. Mom's family had banked there for generations. Your mother said you'd come eventually, he said, leading me to the vault. Inside the box was a USB drive, folders full of documents, and a letter addressed to me in Mom's handwriting. My dearest Mia, it began. By now, Lauren has probably worked her way into your lives completely. I've known about her for years. I read the letter twice, hands trembling. Mom had uncovered Dad's affair with Lauren 6 months before her diagnosis. She'd hired a private investigator who documented everything: hotel receipts, text messages, photos of them together while Mom was picking me up from soccer practice. The report was meticulous, spanning months. Photographs of Dad and Lauren entering hotels in 3 different cities. Screenshots of texts that turned my stomach. She's taking Mia to her mother's this weekend. Come over. Can you imagine when we don't have to hide anymore? Sometimes I wish she'd just disappear. That last message was from Dad, sent 4 months before Mom got sick. I flipped through credit card statements, showing dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of on nights Dad claimed to be working late, gift receipts for jewelry that never made it to Mom's dresser, a lease agreement for an apartment downtown that wasn't in our family records. But there was more. The files contained financial records showing that Dad and Lauren had been systematically transferring funds from Mom's family trust, money meant for me, into offshore accounts. They'd been planning this for years, waiting for the right moment. Mom's family had built one of the city's largest investment firms over 3 generations. When she married Dad, he was just a promising advisor with ambition. She'd brought him into the company, mentored him, helped him rise to partner. The trust was her family's legacy, and I was supposed to be its future. I found detailed spreadsheets tracking millions diverted through shell companies, fake client accounts, and manipulated investments. The money moved through a dozen countries before disappearing into numbered accounts. Dad's signature appeared on every critical document. Lauren's was on most. The worst part were the medical records suggesting Mom's unexpected decline might not have been so unexpected. Strange test results, unusual prescriptions, toxicology reports she'd commissioned privately when she became suspicious. I started feeling wrong after our anniversary dinner. Mom wrote, "Just tired at first, then increasingly ill." The doctors couldn't explain my symptoms. When I began keeping track, I noticed I only felt this way after meals that Thomas prepared specially for me. There were lab reports analyzing hair samples, showing elevated levels of heavy metals, consistent with long-term poisoning. Results from tests on food samples from our home, notes from consultations with 3 different medical specialists who all noted the unusual progression of her symptoms. "I can't prove anything," Mom wrote, "and by the time you read this, it won't matter for me. But I couldn't leave you unprotected." The final page of her letter detailed her counter plan, a second secret trust she'd established in my name. The house and business I thought Dad controlled, technically mine when I turned 18. Mom had changed her will 2 weeks before she died, working with attorneys Dad didn't even know existed. "I've made sure that what's rightfully yours remains protected," she wrote. "The trustees will reach out on your 18th birthday automatically, but if you find this letter earlier, you can contact them using the information in the enclosed envelope. They're ready when you are." I sat alone in the bank's private conference room for what felt like hours, processing everything. When I finally stepped out, something inside me had shifted. The fog of grief and confusion that had consumed me for nearly 4 years had crystallized into something sharper: focus, resolve. I didn't confront Dad. I didn't run. I didn't call the police. I did something far more unsettling. I became the perfect daughter. For the next 2 years, I played my part with precision. I earned top marks, joined the clubs Lauren encouraged, youth council, student leadership, even a teen finance mentorship she hosted at Dad's firm. I attended every exhausting work gala, dressed in the outfits she picked, smiled for photos, and made polite conversation with people who'd forgotten my name minutes later, all while hiding what I knew. At night, I became someone else. I cataloged every detail of their ongoing schemes. Each time Dad mentioned a new deal or complicated client during dinner, I took notes in my head, then researched the companies after they went to bed. I followed the money trail: shell corporations, overseas accounts, dummy investments, adding layer after layer to the spreadsheets Mom had started. My bedroom transformed into a war room. I installed a hidden safe behind my bookshelf and kept encrypted backups of every file. I recorded dinner conversations, captured business calls when they thought I was doing homework in the next room. I photographed contracts Dad left scattered across his desk, confident that his 16-year-old daughter wouldn't understand terms like discretionary transfer or non-recourse loan. 6 months after finding Mom's letter, I was ready. The envelope contained 3 business cards, a forensic accountant, a white-collar crime attorney, and a retired judge, Mom's father's lifelong friend. I told them my story over the phone first, but the day I met them in person at the judge's quiet home in a wooded suburb while Lauren thought I was at a weekend model on seminar was different. Seeing their faces as they reviewed the files, the photos, the timelines, it confirmed everything. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't overreacting. And I wasn't alone anymore. The accountant let out a long breath as he scanned the documents. The lawyer muttered a curse under her breath. The judge stared at me, his expression a mixture of grief and steely resolve. "Your mother was one of the most principled women I ever knew," he said quietly. "What do you want to do, Mia?" I'd spent months thinking about that question. I could have gone public, immediately shattered the image Dad and Lauren had built, dragged them into court, exposed every lie. I could have vanished, waited in the shadows until I turned 18 and claimed everything quietly. I could have confronted them, unleashed years of fury, but I didn't. Instead, I chose Mom's path. Calculated, deliberate justice. "I want to learn," I said. "Everything. About the business, about finance, the law, how to run a company. I want to be ready when it's time to take back what's mine." The judge nodded, unsurprised. "Your mother said you'd say that. She left a plan for if you chose this road." For the next 18 months, I lived 2 lives. At home, I was flawless. I aced my exams, became co-president of student council, let Lauren show me off at networking brunches and charity galas. She loved talking about my bright future in finance to anyone who'd listen. But 3 nights a week, while she thought I was tutoring or at environmental club, I met with the team Mom had chosen. The accountant Daniel taught me how to dissect a balance sheet, trace shell companies, and spot manipulated ledgers. I learned how offshore accounts were created, how assets were hidden, and how to follow the money through digital smoke and mirrors. The lawyer Angela walked me through contracts, mergers, corporate structures, and legal codes designed to protect power. We studied every clause in the trust, every loophole Dad had tried to exploit. She taught me how to speak their language and how to outmaneuver them with it. The Judge Robert connected me to Mom's old allies, bankers, analysts, compliance officers, people who had admired her integrity and were horrified by what had happened after her death. Together, they were shaping me into something Dad and Lauren could never have predicted. An heir they couldn't control, a daughter they'd underestimated, and the storm that would reclaim everything. While Lauren and my dad celebrated my early graduation, I was quietly working with the team Mom had put in place, her lawyers, the accountant, the judge preparing everything, the trust, the evidence, the plan. I finished high school at 16, a year ahead of schedule. Dad and Lauren were ecstatic. Their prodigy, bound for Stanford with a full scholarship. What they didn't know was that I'd also been enrolled in online business and finance courses that helped me understand every layer of the company Dad now controlled. The shell accounts they thought were invisible. "We're so proud of you," Dad said at my graduation dinner, which wasn't really mine. Just a handful of their friends, none of mine. "You've exceeded all our expectations," Lauren added, one manicured hand resting on my shoulder as the photographer clicked away. "Stanford early admission. The board's already talking about your future at the firm." I smiled for the camera, knowing the board would be mine before they even saw it coming. Later that summer, during lunch at one of Lauren's usual to plate spots, she looked at me with a warm expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mia, I've been thinking," she said, dabbing her lips with a cloth napkin. "I'd really love to make things official. I want to adopt you before you leave for school. You're my daughter in every way that counts." I watched her carefully, her expression, the slight tension around her mouth, the quick glance toward Dad before returning her eyes to mine. She wasn't doing this out of love. This was about optics. A legal tie to me meant a stronger claim to the company. If anything ever happened to Dad, I leaned in, smiled, and hugged her. That would mean the world to me. Dad was already flagging down the server. "We should celebrate. A weekend retreat, maybe Sonoma. The Morgans could come. Their son just interned at a venture capital firm near Stanford." "That sounds perfect," I said, nodding along. I thought of the folder I'd built on the Morgans, biotech startup, how it had narrowly avoided bankruptcy last year thanks to a sudden cash injection from one of Dad's dummy corporations. That night, I met with my trustees in the judge's wood-paneled study. I told Dad I was sleeping over at Claire's to celebrate graduation. "They want me to sign adoption papers," I told them. "Will that change anything?" Angela, the lawyer, laid out several documents across the table. Actually, it could benefit us. The adoption process requires a full disclosure of finances. It gives us a legal path to update data on their holdings. It won't touch your mother's trust. It's sealed tight. How close are we? I asked. Daniel, the accountant, adjusted his glasses. We've tracked 67% of the missing money. It's been funneled through for countries, but we've identified the accounts. Once we hit 80%, we'll have enough to force a full forensic audit. 18 months ago, I was clinging to Mom's scarf in bed, feeling powerless. Now, I was holding the map to the empire they tried to steal from both of us. It was more than enough for criminal charges. And the evidence about your mother's illness? The judge asked gently. That was the hardest part. The thought that Dad hadn't just betrayed her but might have helped her die. It hollowed me out. The medical experts we consulted couldn't say definitively, but the inconsistencies were enough to raise flags. Timing, dosage, access it warranted an investigation. We keep that separate for now, I said, one battle at a time. As I gathered my things, the judge reached into a drawer and handed me a small, carefully wrapped box. Your mother left this for you, he said. She told me to give it to you when you were ready to move forward. Inside was a vintage Melange fountain pen that had belonged to my grandfather. The lacquered burgundy barrel still gleamed. She used this to sign the papers for her first major acquisition. The judge said quietly, she wanted you to have it when the time came to reclaim what's yours. From that night on, I carried it everywhere. In my backpack, in my coat pocket always closed. It wasn't just a pen. It was a promise. 2 weeks later, Mother's Day arrived. Lauren had always made a spectacle of it, lavish brunches, curated photo ops for her followers. She'd post a carousel of staged moments, captioned with inspirational quotes about family and resilience. This year, she'd outdone herself. A garden party for 30 of their closest friends, complete with a custom floral arch, signature cocktails, and a catered lunch under white canopy tents. The adoption announcement was the intended centerpiece. I spent the week leading up to it working late every night in my room. Not on finals, not on packing for Stanford, but on her gift. My most personal project to date, an organized dossier of every bank statement, asset transfer, and shell company tied to Dad's firm. It was color-coded, time-stamped, indexed. The irony wasn't lost on me. It was, by far, the most thoughtful gift I had ever given her. That morning, the sky was cloudless and bright. Temperatures hovered in the mid-70s, perfect for Lauren's manicured, party aesthetic. By 7, the house buzzed with motion. Caterers unloading silver trays, florists wiring peonies into latticework, the planning team directing a white-gloved staff as they transformed our backyard into something clean, controlled, and entirely unlike the tangled, wild garden Mom once loved. I found Lauren in her dressing room, half-dressed, surrounded by gowns in every neutral tone imaginable. She held up 2 nearly identical cream-colored dresses. What do you think? She asked. The Dior or the Chanel? The Chanel, I said automatically, watching as she set aside the Dior, the one I'd picked 2 weeks ago. When she'd asked my opinion over coffee, she never chose what I liked on the first try. I have something for you, I said, holding out a boxed silver-wrapped white satin bow. She smiled, intrigued, not yet aware of the weight inside. Happy Mother's Day. Oh, you didn't have to, Lauren said, her surprise teetering on the edge of real. We both knew I'd never given her a Mother's Day gift before, not even a card. I wanted to, I said calmly. For today's announcement, she smiled, perfect and composed, and set the silver-wrapped box beside her untouched mimosa. I'll open it later during the party. More special that way. I'd rather you open it now, I said, voice still soft, but with a precision that cut through the air. It's personal. Something in my tone made her pause. She studied me a beat too long, then reached for the ribbon. The box opened with a quiet snap. Inside was a custom-bound book, thick with carefully pressed pages. On the leather cover, embossed in gold foil, a daughter's gratitude. Oh, Mia, she murmured, visibly touched. her fingers tracing the title. I could see it in her expression. She was expecting curated photos, maybe old-school drawings, a crafted tribute to her maternal performance. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The first page was a photo of my mother, taken before the dizziness started laughing in the wild garden Lauren had paved over. She froze. "What is this?" she asked, voice clipped. "Keep going," I said. "It gets better." Each page was a chapter in the story Mom left behind. Annotated hotel receipts, offshore wire transfers, bank statements in Lauren's name from 5 countries. I had indexed it all. Behind every document, a motive. Next to every transaction, a consequence. The book unfolded like a prosecution. I watched her closely. Her posture stiffened. Confusion gave way to recognition. Recognition dissolved into panic. When she reached the section on the diverted trust funds, a bead of sweat slid down her temple, streaking through her foundation. "This is absurd," she whispered, her voice unsteady, but her hands kept flipping pages. They couldn't stop. Near the back, she found the restructured trust, the legal notice of intent, and a printed confirmation for tomorrow morning's meeting. Judge Henderson's chambers, 9 a.m. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division would be on standby. "Those offshore accounts you and Dad set up," I said, settling onto the edge of her vanity. "Turns out they're not so hidden after all. Between new banking transparency treaties and geolocation data from your phone, it's almost laughably easy to connect you." Her face lost what little color remained. "I've traced 84% of the missing assets. The rest is just a matter of time. You, your father and I," she stammered, grasping for authority, "will be very interested in the terms you think you can offer." "Oh, I think you'll find my terms preferable to federal charges." She stood abruptly, knocking over the mimosa. "You ungrateful little." "Careful," I said, my voice low, calm. "Your guests are watching, and I haven't decided whether to let them see what's in Chapter 3. She glanced down. The book lay open to her messages with Dad sent during the last week of Mom's life, whining about hospital visiting hours cutting into their dinner plans, bragging about how she'll be gone soon anyway. "What do you want?" she hissed, adjusting her Chanel dress with trembling hands. "You're going to go downstairs," I said. "You'll smile. You'll host your party. You'll act like today is everything you've ever wanted. And tomorrow at 9 o'clock, you and Dad will sit across from me at Judge Henderson's office and we'll decide the terms of your continued freedom." Her eyes darted toward the door, maybe looking for an escape, but there was none. "This is blackmail," she whispered. "No," I corrected, picking up the vintage pen from my pocket, the one Mom used to sign her first deal. "This is justice." With a flicker of mercy earned, not given, I turned toward the door. "You have 30 seconds to fix your makeup," I said quietly. "They're waiting." The party lasted 3 grueling hours. Lauren never faltered, at least not outwardly. She floated through her perfectly curated garden party with trembling fingers hidden behind a flute of champagne and a smile that refused to reach her eyes. I played my part just as flawlessly, devoted, beaming, full of rehearsed warmth. To Lauren, I toasted mid-party, raising my glass. Her influence has been life-changing. Lauren's knuckles whitened around her stemware. Only we understood the layers in those words. "Mia's been such a blessing," she told Mrs. Henderson, the judge's wife, her voice syrupy. "I couldn't love her more if she were my own." "And Lauren," I replied smoothly, catching her gaze, "has taught me so much about loyalty and consequences." Mrs. Henderson gave us a tight smile, her eyes darting between us as if she felt something beneath the surface, but couldn't quite name it. "Well, you're clearly wonderful for each other," she said. "Just wonderful." Dad texted around then, running late, still at the club, just as well. His own gift was waiting in his office. Upstairs, a copy of the same book I'd given Lauren, but with addenda tailored to his part in the fraud. Financial records, corporate emails, time-stamped transactions linked to his device logins. The legal crosshairs were precisely aligned. As the guests trickled out, they offered compliments and obligatory congratulations on Stanford, on the party, on my glow. I stood at Lauren's side, receiving hugs from women who wore vintage, Chanel-like armor and men who'd known my grandfather but couldn't remember my name. "Everything all right with Lauren?" one of Dad's partners asked in a low voice, brow furrowed. "She seems tense." "She's just overwhelmed," I said with a soft smile. "The adoption today means a lot to her." The last car pulled away just after 5. Lauren vanished. I found her 20 minutes later in the master bedroom, frantically stuffing jewelry and passports into a carry-on. "Going somewhere?" I asked from the doorway. She spun around, a bundle of velvet pouches clutched in one hand. "You can't prove anything," she snapped. "It's all circumstantial. It won't hold. The FBI disagrees. So does the SEC." I stepped inside. "But by all means try to run. The agent at the end of the street would love the photo op." That part wasn't true, not yet, but she didn't know that. Lauren's legs buckled slightly, and she sank onto the edge of the bed. Her suitcase remained half-zipped, chaotic and desperate. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now," I said, "we wait for Dad, then we negotiate." An hour later, the front door opened. "Mia," Dad called. "Lauren?" He appeared in the foyer, shirt untucked, tie loosened, golf shoes still on. "How was the party?" he asked. I handed him the second book. "She's upstairs," I said. "But you should open this first." He frowned, but obeyed. As he flipped through the pages, I watched the shift, confusion giving way to realization, then to calculation. He didn't protest, didn't ask questions. His lawyer instincts kicked in before shock could take hold. When he finally looked up, his face was unreadable. "Where did you get all of this?" "Mom left it," I said. "She knew. She prepared." A flicker almost guilt passed through his eyes. "It was gone in a blink." "Mia, whatever you think is documented," I cut in triplicate, secured, and not just the money. "There's more. About Mom, her illness, the timing, the medications." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His face strained of color. "You can't actually think that I poisoned her." "I don't know," I said calmly. The toxicology was inconclusive, but combined with the timing, the insurance changes, and the medication records, there's enough to justify opening a case. If I choose to." He closed the book with slow, deliberate hands, like it might detonate. "What do you want?" "The same thing I told your wife," I said. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Judge Henderson's office. We'll talk about how you can both avoid prison." That evening, after the last of the guests left, I found Lauren sitting in the garden. Not Mom's garden. Mom's was wild and full of color, an organized chaos of native blooms and soft disorder. Lauren had replaced it with stark white furniture, stone planters and ornamental lavender, sterile, controlled. "Why now?" she asked, staring at nothing. "Why wait?" I lowered myself onto the bench beside her, smoothing the fabric of my dress. "Mom taught me patience," I said, "and I needed time to learn everything first." Lauren didn't look at me. "What do you want?" I had rehearsed this moment for 2 years. I imagined satisfaction, a sense of triumph, maybe even joy. Instead, I felt nothing. "Dad signs the company over to me," I said evenly. "Through the original trust. You both resign publicly but stay on as consultants under supervision. The funds you funneled into offshore accounts come back to the trust. In exchange, I don't press criminal charges." She laughed bitterly. "You're 16. Almost 17, I corrected. "With the same legal team Mom put in place before she died. Trustees, advisors. I've been preparing for this since I was 12. Footsteps crunched across the patio. "Dad." Lauren's fingers clenched. The sides of the bench. "He'll never agree," she muttered. "He already has," I said, standing. "Check your phone." While we sat outside, Dad had been reading his copy of my Mother's Day gift. His message to Lauren was only 3 words. "She knows everything." Dad joined us in the fading light, his face drawn, older than he had looked that morning. You didn't have to do it like this, he said softly. You could have come to me, like Mom did, I asked. When she confronted you about the affair, or when she asked about the missing funds. How'd those conversations work out? He didn't answer. He didn't have one. The company's more than numbers, Mia, he tried instead. It's built on trust, relationships. You force us out, you risk all of that. It's already been mitigated, I said. Mom's original leadership team is ready. Most of them never trusted you. They only stayed out of loyalty to her memory. Lauren turned to him sharply. You said they were loyal to you, that they'd follow your lead. He lied, I said before Dad could respond. Like he lied about the prenup you signed. Her expression shifted. What prenup? The one you signed after Mom's diagnosis. I said, with the infidelity clause. The one that leaves you with nothing if you divorce. Dad's eyes narrowed. You said that was off the table. Lauren's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes flicked away from his. And your affair with Ryan Donahue from legal, I added, still ongoing, despite what you told him. She paled. You really thought the hotel charges wouldn't show up in the audits? I asked. Dad's confusion turned to fury. You told me that was over, he growled. It is, she said quickly, but her voice broke. Mia is twisting things. That's your specialty, I said. I prefer direct approaches. I stepped back toward the house. Tomorrow, 9 sharp. Don't be late, and don't try to leave. There are people watching the street. I didn't wait for a reply. Inside, I called Judge Henderson to confirm the meeting. Then I emailed the entire dossier, every receipt, text, and signature to the trustees. Instructions were simple. If I hadn't checked in by noon, forward everything to the FBI and the California State Bar. Sleep never came. I lay in the dark, listening to the distant echoes of their argument down the hall, voices sharp, brittle, breaking. Around 3 o'clock a.m., a car engine turned over and drove off into the night. By sunrise, the house was quiet. I dressed with care. A navy suit Mom had bought me the year I placed first in the national debate semifinals. I hadn't worn it since. It still fit. The pearl earrings caught the light, subtle, classic. My makeup was minimal. A clean line of eyeliner, neutral lips. Polished but serious. Older than 16. I came downstairs to find Dad alone at the kitchen island, still in yesterday's clothes. His tie was loosened but not removed, his shirt wrinkled, a half-finished cup of coffee cooling beside him. Where's Lauren? I asked, though I already knew. Gone, he said, flat. Took the Mercedes, emptied her jewelry case, left her phone on the counter so she couldn't be traced. I anticipated that contingency, I replied, adjusting the scarf Mom gave me before her last hospital stay. He exhaled shakily. It complicates things, but doesn't change them, I said. She's not the primary stakeholder. He looked up then, and for a moment the haze in his eyes cleared. You look like her, he said. Your mother, when she was fighting for something. The comment landed somewhere between ache and pride. We should go, I said. Judge Henderson doesn't tolerate delays. The meeting was clinical, methodical. Judge Henderson walked us through the documents with sharp precision. My father, stripped of the executive polish he'd worn my entire life, signed each page in silence. Power of attorney, transfer of voting rights, resignation from Preston Morgan Biotech. Each signature was a nail in the coffin of the empire they'd tried to steal. You understand, Judge Henderson said, tone clipped, that these terms are contingent on full cooperation with the financial recovery investigation. Any attempt to withhold information or conceal assets will activate the criminal charges. Dad nodded, slow and mechanical. And the company's public statement will follow the draft we provided, framed as a generational transition, a tribute to Catherine's vision. Another nod. Sign here and here. Initial these. He complied without speaking, using the Mont Blanc pen I'd brought, the one Mom gave him on their anniversary, the last before the symptoms started. Finally, Judge Henderson slid one more document across the table. This stipulates that you will not contact Mia directly, by any means, until her 18th birthday. All communication goes through the trustees or this office. Dad's head jerked up. What? That's my daughter. You can't sign it, I said softly, or I release the medical file, the altered prescriptions, the clinic visits, the drafts of emails Lauren deleted from Mom's account. His hand trembled, but he signed. When the pen dropped, it sounded final. His shoulders sagged in defeat. The confident man who'd run a multi-million-dollar firm now looked small. Can I explain? He asked, barely a whisper. I've read your explanations, I said. The ones in your emails to Lauren. The ones attached to the unauthorized transfers. The statement you prepared for the board last year, evaluating me as a potential symbol, not a leader. I paused, then met his eyes. I understand perfectly. Judge Henderson stood, signaling the end. You'll be escorted to the hotel, he told my father. You may return to the house in 7 days to collect personal belongings, supervised. Dad rose, hesitated by my chair. Your mother would be proud, he said. It wasn't clear whether it was meant as a compliment, a warning, or an apology. I know, I replied. 2 months later, I sat at the head of the long walnut table in what used to be Dad's office, now mine. Across from me sat the CFO, 2 board members, and 3 of the senior partners who had remained loyal to Mom until the very end. The Morgan contract was open in front of me. I picked up the pen. This is just the beginning, I said, and I signed. The company transition was announced as a carefully crafted family succession plan, celebrated with glowing press releases about the youngest female CEO in the biotech industry. Dad remained a figurehead, bound by ironclad contracts that monitored every financial decision he tried to make. He kept the house, preserved his social standing, and avoided prison. In return, I gained what was rightfully mine: complete control, and his full submission to quarterly audits where I scrutinized every aspect of his professional conduct. The trustees became my executive team, guiding me through the countless decisions needed to stabilize the company. After years of Dad's manipulation, I deferred Stanford for a year, dedicating myself to practical business education within the firm. Lauren resurfaced in Miami 3 weeks after she fled. The FBI arrested her trying to access one of the offshore accounts we had flagged. She spent 2 nights in jail before Dad's lawyers negotiated her release in exchange for her full cooperation. Under strict monitoring, she returned to Connecticut, living in a company-owned condo and working as a client liaison with severely limited authority. The prenup I'd mentioned proved prophetic. Dad filed for divorce, citing abandonment and infidelity, leaving Lauren with only what our carefully crafted separation agreement allowed. She fought back initially, threatening to expose the company's financial fraud until my lawyers reminded her she would be the primary target of any investigation. It wasn't justice for Mom. Nothing could ever bring that back. But it was the beginning of what she wanted for me: control over my own future, protection of her legacy, and accountability for those who had betrayed her. The search for definitive proof about Mom's illness continued quietly. I hired specialists to re-examine tissue samples the hospital had preserved. New tests were ordered on items from her vanity that I'd kept untouched. I interviewed the medical staff who had treated her. The results remained frustratingly inconclusive: suspicious patterns, but no smoking gun. Dad maintained his innocence on that front, even in private meetings with his attorneys where he admitted to everything else. The cancer was real, he insisted. I never touched her medication, never altered her food. I wanted her gone. Yes, I wished her dead, but I didn't make it happen. I didn't know whether to believe him. Part of me needed him to be guilty of everything, a complete monster whose destruction I could pursue without reservation. Yet another part of me clung to the hope that one line might remain uncrossed, a fragment of the father I once loved. Under new management, the company flourished. We unraveled Dad's convoluted schemes, recovered most of the diverted funds, and rebuilt client relationships damaged by years of his shortcuts. I worked 16-hour days, more often sleeping on the office couch than at home. Home no longer felt like home. I sold the house 6 months after taking control and moved into a downtown apartment within walking distance of the office. Dad relocated to a smaller house in the suburbs, stripped of his country club memberships and most of his social circle, following the carefully worded but transparent company statement that made it clear he had been forced out. Last week, I visited Mom's grave for the first time since reading her letter. I did what you asked, I whispered, placing wildflowers against the stone. The company is safe. Your legacy is protected. I wish you could see it. As I turned, I noticed a familiar figure watching from a distance. Lauren, clutching a small bouquet of her own. Our eyes met across the cemetery. She didn't approach but nodded once before walking away. Some lessons take years to teach. Some gifts keep giving long after they're opened. Every Mother's Day since, I send Lauren the same thing. A single photograph of Mom smiling in her garden, with a note that reads, "Thinking of you today." She never responds, but I know she understands. It's the only language we have left.